Okay, so we're talking now about markets and demand and supply. And last week I started building up a story of the demand side of the market. The most important thing really is market demand, the market demand is represented by a downward curve. But I tell a story where I think of different consumers in the market. Here are Anne through Mary, and they all have a different willingness to pay for something, a hamburger. Um, Maybe this is just based on their preferences, how hungry they are, how much income they have. For some reason, the different people have different willingness to pay for this hamburger. And then we can take their preferences here on the left and count up at each price the number of people who would be willing to purchase a hamburger. And quantity demanded, okay, and I'm denoting that. I'm using the notation Q with a subscript D. Quantity demanded is the number willing to purchase something, willing and able to purchase at a price. So at a price of $10, there is one person, Anne, who's willing to purchase a hamburger. At a price of $9, both Anne and Bob are willing to purchase hamburgers. So that's two people. If the price comes down to $8, an extra just an extra two more people. So there'd be four, and so forth. So we can write out this table of quantity demanded at each price. Now, often, instead of writing demand as a table, which would be one way of doing it, we instead we graph the demand curve. As a matter of fact, when we do a lot of our discussions of what happens when circumstances change in a market, we do simply a graph. We don't use real numbers like a table. We just think of sort of conceptually the demand curve is this relationship, like this downward sloping relationship between price and quantity demanded. So, at any rate, to graph the demand curve, we take these points, like at a price of $10, quantity demanded is 1. So we plot this point right here. Price of $9, quantity demanded is 2. So here's $9. Quantity demanded is 2. And we plot that point. And so plot all these different points. Then in the next step, we connect the dots. And here's a demand curve. The most important thing is that the demand curve, when we graph it, the demand curve is downward sloping. Okay. It always goes down. Okay. And this is the same as what we call the law of demand. As price decreases, the quantity demanded increases. As price decreases, the quantity that people are willing and able to purchase increases. And again, I think this idea is not very controversial. If something becomes cheaper, people are able to buy more, and people are willing to buy more. All right, now there is a caveat, which is everything else the same. Okay, the demand curve shows the relationship between price and quantity demanded, holding everything else constant. Now, there are a handful of factors that can change the demand curve, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. Okay, first of these factors is income. And income could work in one of two ways. Some goods we classify as normal goods, and some we classify as inferior goods. Okay. Normal goods are one where as your income rises, demand increases. Okay, now let me clarify something. When I say demand increases, that means that, okay, actually that means one of two things, and these are equivalent. At each price, quantity demanded is higher. The same price, you buy more. It also means that willingness to pay for any quantity increases. So if previously you were willing to buy a hamburger for $7, you would be willing, when your demand increases, you would be willing to buy that same hamburger for $8, or willing to pay $8 for that same hamburger. Okay, so normal goods, as income rises, demand increases. This is most things. Most things, if you had more time, or sorry, if you had more money, you would purchase more of them. The exceptions are inferior goods, and for these, as income falls, demand increases. Okay. Inferior goods are usually something that have an alternative, but a more expensive alternative. And as your income rises, you shift toward purchasing that alternative. But my examples of inferior goods, ramen noodles. If you had more money, you would buy fewer ramen noodles and more real food. Yeah. Another example would be used cars. Used cars are nice, but if you had more money, you would buy fewer used cars and more new cars. Okay, now the important part of being an inferior good is just the first part of that statement. As your income rises, you purchase fewer used cars. Okay, but again, usually inferior goods show up in the context of there is an alternative, and as people's income rises, their demand for the alternative goes up. Does that make sense? Okay, so next on the list of factors impacting demand, prices of related goods. Okay. Sometimes it can be the case that a change in the price of good A impacts demand for good B. So, off the top of your head, can you think of an example where the price of one good impacts your demand for another good? Yeah. Okay, having a car, you're going to buy gas. Okay, now let's reframe this in terms of prices. You're on the right track. Mm, if you have a car, you're going to have to pay more for gas. Prices. Um, think about, okay, let me reframe that. As the price of gas goes up, does that impact your demand for cars? If gas were to become more expensive, does that impact your demand for cars? That's the type of scenario I'm talking about. Does that make sense? Okay, those are related goods. And Rachel, correct? Okay. Do you see a connection between? Okay. And how might that work? Like, because it's true. When gas prices go up, demand for especially like SUVs and other gas guzzling cars goes down. Okay, so there's a connection. Again, we call them related goods. Okay, we classify related goods into two types. Some are substitutes. The others are complements. Okay, substitutes, I'd say conceptually, the way to think about them is you want one or the other, but not both. Okay, so remember my story about Ann and Bob and Chris and Dan are all thinking about buying a hamburger for dinner tonight. Okay, but then at a nearby pizza shop, pizza is on sale right next door to the hamburger place. Well, some of those people are going to walk down. They'll be like, well, I'm thinking of buying my hamburger for dinner for $8, and then they see pizza has been marked down from $2 a slice to 50 cents a slice. Pizza has become cheaper. And they say, hey, I'm not going to get a hamburger tonight. I'm going to get pizza instead. Okay? Substitute goods and a reduction in the price of pizza impacts demand for hamburgers. Okay, so as I say, substitute goods, they're kind of things where you want one or the other, but not both. Now, the technical version of this, what we care about for our analysis, is that a decrease in the price of the substitute reduces demand for this good. Okay. So, the other type of related good is a complement. And by the way, this word complement, it's spelled with an E in the middle. Here, some language notes for you. There are two words in English that pretty much sound the same. Okay, complement with an I is something nice that you say about another person. So Rachel, that was a very thoughtful comment you made earlier. I just paid Rachel a compliment with an I. Compliment with an E means something that goes along with. Okay, something else. Okay, and it comes from the word complete, right? Complement. They make something complete. Okay, anyhow, these complementary goods are ones that tend to be consumed better together than on their own. So give me just a second to erase that stuff. Okay, complements like this, you tend to want to consume together, and not as useful alone. Okay, so peanut butter. Peanut butter has a famous complement. What goes well with peanut butter? I hope we don't get strange answers to this. What is peanut butter's like hand-in-hand partner? Jelly, right? Peanut butter and jelly, they go together. People tend to want to consume them together. Those are complementary goods. That's the idea. And the impact of changing the price of one on the other, think of it along these lines. When the price of peanut butter goes up, it'll impact demand for jelly. Because when peanut butter becomes more expensive, you purchase less peanut butter. And because you're purchasing less peanut butter, you are making fewer peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and you need less jelly. Okay? So peanut butter becomes more expensive, you need less jelly. And that's the technical description of a complement. Let's say a decrease in the price of the complement increases demand for this good. If I go to the grocery store and I'm looking down the condiments aisle and I see peanut butter's on sale, well, that's great. I'm going to buy 2 jars of peanut butter this week instead of just 1. And because of that, I need to purchase more jelly. It's increased my demand for jelly. So again, a decrease in the price of peanut butter increases my demand for jelly. So let's see. Let me do an example. And Rachel, somehow you jumped the gun on this and you start to steal my example. Let me do a traditional gas-powered car. Okay. What is a complement? What is a complementary good? And you can think of this 2 ways. One is the technical version. When that good becomes cheaper, it increases demand. Or you can think of it in the informal version. It's something that is better consumed with this good, with the car, than on its own. There's a simple, obvious answer to this. Rachel? Gas. Okay. If gas becomes cheaper, demand for gas-powered cars rises. Okay, as gas becomes more expensive, demand for gas-powered car goes down. What's a substitute? Oh, and by the way, remember my explanation, complements are things that you tend to want to consume together rather than on their own. Like buying a car but no gasoline is kind of useless. And buying gasoline without a car is also useless. But when you buy both of them together, you get something useful. So that's sort of that second explanation of complementary goods. Okay, substitutes. What's a substitute for a gas-powered car? You want one or the other, but not both? What? Electric car, yeah. Just the way that I worded that, again, was kind of leading. Electric-powered car. And, again, my way of thinking about substitutes intuitively is you want one or the other, but not both. There's no reason to have both an electric. Well, there are a few reasons to have both an electric and a gas-powered car, but also their prices impact one another. As the price of electric cars comes down, demand for gas-powered cars falls. Okay, I think that makes sense, right? All right, so let's see. I've talked about two things that impact demand. One is income, the other is the price of related goods. Next on my list, preferences. Okay, and preferences are what preferences are. Just people have different desires for purchasing hamburgers, whatever. Sorry, I'm going to pause for a second. I've got tape that's almost poking me in the eyes. I put tape on here. As you glasses people know, these stupid glasses fog up, and the tape tries to cut down on that. But now I've got tape kind of poking into my eyes. Oh. Okay. Let's see if that helps. Okay, preferences are just what they are. Some people like peanut butter, some people don't. Some people like hamburgers, some people don't. And things can change that alter our preferences. And if something alters our preferences, it could just cause us or it could cause the demand curve to change, or demand as a whole to change. Okay. The next thing on the list, information or expectations. Information and expectations. Okay, so I've told you all my wife works in public health, modeling the spread of disease. And I remember at the end of last January, she was like, this new thing in China looks pretty bad. And could get bad. We're starting to see spread of it outside of China. And we're starting to see whatever. And she was like, we should prepare to stay at home for this could get bad and we are forced to stay at home for the next 12 to 18 months. I was like, okay, honey, sure, whatever. And she's like, we need to buy supplies. And it's like, okay, honey, sure, whatever. You're the expert. I was like, but I'm the economist. I get to pick the supplies that we're going to buy. Okay, but no, her expectations about what could happen in the future impacted our demand at that time. And I was like, well, in the post-apocalyptic world, this was really my priority list. I was like, the things that everyone are going to need will be toilet paper, Girl Scout cookies, and chewing tobacco. And I was right about at least one of the three. We're still using pre-pandemic toilet paper at our house. I haven't bought any toilet paper in 13 months. Hand sanitizer, we still have that. I felt guilty about it when there was a shortage. And it's like, yeah, well, my wife told me to do this. Now we have more than we need, but it's not my fault that we hoarded. Anyhow, again, the point here is expectations about the future can impact demand. Okay, she seemed so crazy at the time, like last January. Okay, of course, right now we're coming up on a year of this stuff, right? Oh, okay. It's really interesting. Should I go off on a tangent or keep doing economics? Economics? Okay, fine. Okay, information expectations impact our demand. Oh, and the last thing on this list is number of buyers in the market will impact the entire demand in the market. As we add more buyers to the market, the amount that people will purchase at any price increases just because there are more people. At this point, let me go and show you all what it looks like when there is an increase in demand. Okay, any of those factors that I talked about earlier will increase or decrease demand, and they will all operate more or less in the same way. Something that increases demand will change the shape of the entire demand curve, or move the entire demand curve. And something, let's suppose that everyone in this economy, like Ann, Bob, Chris, Dan, they all get more income. And hamburgers are a normal good. Well, with more income, they're all willing to pay an extra $1 for a hamburger. Okay? So there are two ways that we can think about this impacting the market. One is if they're all willing to pay an extra $1 for a hamburger, that means at the same price, the quantity demanded increases. So, like, okay, earlier, let me put 11 here. Okay, let me start off. Earlier, before the change, the quantity demanded at $11 was 0. Now in green, I'm going to do, like, once people have more income and they're willing to pay more, Ann is now willing to pay $11 for a hamburger. So there'd be one person who purchases a hamburger for $1. Both Ann and Bob would be willing to buy a hamburger for $10. So that's two people who'd pay $10. There are now 4 people who'd pay $9, 6 people who'd pay $8, 9 people who'd pay $7, 13 people willing to pay $5. I guess still 13 people willing to pay $6, also 13 willing to pay $5. Okay, so all of these values increase. And when we go through the graph, we can replot the points. And so now at $11, there's one person willing to purchase a hamburger. At a price of $10, there are now 2 people. At a price of $9, there are now 4 people. I mean, again, coming up from 4 to here. At a price of $8, there are 6 people. So that's this point. And so forth. Every point has been shifted up by exactly $1. Okay? When everyone's willingness to pay increased by $1, it shifted up the demand curve by exactly $1 all throughout. Okay, so when we play connect the dots with these, we have our new demand curve. Got it? Okay. So an increase in demand will cause the demand curve to shift up, or we could say right. Yeah, the green curve is above the red curve. The green curve is also to the right of the red curve. Both are accurate descriptions. Okay, now, as a matter of notation, often when something changes in a graph, when I do like a before versus after style of analysis, the after values will get, like if I call something A before, after, I put this little apostrophe up high. That's called, or that's pronounced A prime. Okay, so specifically in this picture, if I'm talking about what happens to demand for hamburgers when income rises, I refer to that new demand curve as D prime. Got it? Okay. Any questions before I finish on demand? Okay. We've done the demand side of the market, and now let me move to the supply side of the market, the sellers. And I would tell a similar story about the seller side of the market. That there are maybe different firms different firms capable of producing one hamburger each, and they have different costs of producing a hamburger. Okay. They would be willing and able to sell a hamburger at the cost of producing it. Okay, so I've listed a bunch of firms here, A through M, and the cost of producing a hamburger for each of them. For some reason, one of these firms has really low costs. Maybe it has access to cheap beef, and it knows someone who would be willing to work at a low wage. For some reason, firm A has really low costs. Other firms, they have high rental costs, or they don't have a good supplier of the inputs. For whatever reason, there are different costs for different firms, and they are willing and able to sell hamburgers at different prices. Okay, so from this very simple model of a bunch of sellers who are willing to sell at different prices, we can count up the quantity supplied at each price. So Q with this subscript S. That's quantity supplied. And remember, the quantity supplied is the number of sellers who are willing and able to sell at that price. If the market price were $3 for hamburgers, there'd be one of these firms Firm A, willing to sell if the price were $3. So at a price of $3, quantity demanded is 1. If the price increases to $5, then both A and B, 2 firms, would be willing to sell hamburgers. I'm sorry, that's wrong. A and B and C. So there are 3 willing to sell at a price of $5. If the price goes to $7, then there are an extra 3, so a total of 6 firms would sell hamburgers. If the price goes to $9, another 3, so 9 hamburgers would be sold. At a price of 11, there are 12 hamburgers. At a price of $13, 13 hamburgers would be sold. So here is the demand. I'm sorry, not the demand. The supply in the economy. When I talk about the supply, that means at each price, the quantity that would be sold, that producers would like to sell. Once again, I'd like to graph this supply function. So I go to my graph and set up my graph with price on the vertical axis, quantity on the horizontal axis. And I go through these different points. At a price of $3, so that's right here, the quantity that would be supplied would be 1. And so I add that point to the graph. Boom, right here. Okay. Then I go to the next one. At a price of $5, the quantity sold would be 3. So I try to add that point to the graph. Okay. And ta-da. Okay. There's that second point. Okay, and then I continue through this and I add the points one at a time until I get them all in the graph. Then in the next step, I play connect the dots with these different points. Just put them all along one line or curve. Here's my supply curve. Okay, this supply curve tells us at each price the quantity that would be supplied. Now, the important thing about a supply curve is that the supply curve goes up. Supply curve slopes up. In other words, as the price increases, suppliers are willing and able to sell more. Okay, this statement, as the price increases, suppliers are willing and able to sell more. This is known as the law of supply. I feel like this is something that should be easy to accept. If you are a potential supplier, the more you are being offered for the good, number one, the more likely you are to find it attractive to sell, more incentive you have to sell. Number two, the more likely it is that you are able to sell it, like cover your costs and sell it. So willing and able to sell more. This is known as the law of supply. Okay, now, just as with demand, there are other things that can shift the entire supply curve. Okay, when we say just supply curve or talk about just supply, that means if everything else in the economy stays the same, here's the relationship between price and quantity supplied. However, other things can change that will impact the entire supply curve. First on the list, prices of inputs. Okay, inputs into production. So at those hamburger restaurants, restaurant A was willing and able to sell a hamburger for $3. But if ground beef goes up in price, it's no longer going to be able to sell it at that price without losing money. It wouldn't be willing to sell the price or sell the hamburger at a loss. If the price of an input goes up, then then quantity supplied goes down, or the price that the firms would need to get will increase. Okay, so prices of inputs, if they increase, that leads to a reduction in supply. If the price of inputs goes down, it'll increase supply. Let me explain that when I say something increases supply, when something increases supply, that means at all prices, sellers are willing to sell more. Okay. Or equivalently, they would be willing to sell the same amount at a lower price. Okay. So when I say increased supply, this is what I mean. At each price, there would be more available from the suppliers. That's equivalent to saying, or the same quantity would be available at a lower price. Okay, so on my list of things impacting supply, first, prices of inputs. Second, technology. Okay, the production technology matters. As technology improves, usually it brings down the cost of production. And firms are willing to sell the same amount at a lower price, or they can sell more. Sorry, they're willing to sell the same amount at a lower price, or at the same price, they would be willing to sell more. Okay, so technology. Any improvement in technology will lead to an increase in supply. Okay. Sound good? Right. Next thing on my list, feel like there should be feel like I might be missing one. Okay, but let me go ahead. Expectations. Again, are important. Um, for example, my expectations about future prices might impact what I'm willing to sell something for today. Okay, if I'm a supplier and I have a whole bunch of masks in my warehouse, and I think that in the future masks are going to be really valuable things, that would impact the price at which I'd be willing to sell them today, my expectations about the future. And the final thing on this list is number of sellers. Okay. The more firms are selling something, the more that will be available at each price. Okay, so moving on from here, I want to talk about what happens to the supply curve. And I've already got some notes written on here. Supply curve, as I said, it slopes upward. That's the law of supply. And that means that as the price increases, sellers are willing and able to sell more. Okay. Actually, let me remove that. That's not relevant. Okay. What I want to do is the impact of higher input prices. Okay. Imagine that for some reason it becomes more expensive for producers to produce hamburgers, and it increases the cost of a hamburger, whatever this is. An increase in the price of ground beef increases the cost of making a hamburger by $1. Okay, so previously firm A was willing to sell a hamburger at $3. When their input prices go up, they would no longer be willing to sell that same hamburger for $3 because it cost them an extra dollar. Now they would sell that same hamburger for $4. Firms B and C, previously they were willing to sell a hamburger for $5, but once the price of meat goes up, they can no longer sell those hamburgers at $5. They have to increase their price, or they'd be willing to sell them only if the price were $6. So if there were an increase in input cost, which raises the price by plus $1. Okay. Changes the market. Now nobody would be willing to sell a hamburger at $3. One hamburger would get sold if the price were $4. And 3 hamburgers would get sold if the price were $6. And 6 hamburgers would get sold if the price were $8. So it increases all of these values, these prices, by 1. Okay? And so this is what we call a reduction in supply. And there are 2 ways of thinking of that. One is kind of as I illustrate here, that at the same, what I illustrate here is that the same quantity would be supplied only at a higher price. Okay. The other way of explaining it is that at the same price, lower quantity supplied. So this Q with the subscript S, remember that's short for quantity supplied. Okay, I've changed this table showing the supply. Now I want to graph that. So let's see. At a price of $4, one hamburger would be sold. At a price of $6, 3 hamburgers would be sold. So I'm plotting these points. At a price of $8, 6 hamburgers would be sold. Price of $10, 9 hamburgers would be sold. Okay, price of $14? Is that right? Price of $14, 13 hamburgers would be sold. Okay, all of these values on the original supply curve shift up by plus $1. Okay. And so this new supply curve looks like the old one. I'll call this S prime, but it has been shifted up. We could also explain it as having been shifted to the left. So a reduction in supply, graphically, that looks like shifting the whole supply curve left or up. Got it? Okay. So let's see. I've talked through the demand side of the market, and I've talked about things that will impact the whole demand curve. I've talked through the supply side of the market and things that will impact the whole supply curve. Now it's time to put the two curves together and analyze the whole market. So here, I've just taken my two previous examples, the one of demand and the one of supply, and I've put the two curves in the same picture together to think about the connection between the two of them. And on top of that, I want to be able to predict what will be a market equilibrium. Okay. Equilibrium. The reason we have the supply and demand model, or an important reason for the supply and demand model, is so that we can predict what will happen to prices and quantities sold in the marketplace, especially as the economic environment changes. Okay, so market equilibrium is our idea of kind of a stable market. And in particular, the equilibrium price is a stable price where there's no pressure to increase or reduce the price. And that's what we call an equilibrium price. So let me talk through a couple of different prices. First, to explain why they are not equilibrium prices, and then point out which price is the equilibrium price. So first, let's think about what would happen if the price of hamburgers were $9. Okay? If the price of hamburgers were $9, first, well, let me make a mark here. Here's $9. First, on the demand side of the market, how many people would want to purchase hamburgers? Remember, there were only 2 people willing to pay. There were only 2 people willing to pay $9 for a hamburger, Ann and Bob. Okay, so we can say that QD, quantity demanded, is 2. Okay, on the supply side of the market, if the price is $9, there are actually a whole bunch of firms that would like to sell hamburgers, that would make hamburgers and want to sell them. Quantity supplied is 9. Now, by the way, let me point out that's what we see in the curves here. If we follow across from $9 to the demand curve and to the supply curve, these tell us the quantities demanded at the price. So here, where $9 intersects the demand curve, QD is 2. Where it meets the supply curve, if we trace down from that, it's telling us that quantity supplied is equal to 9. So these curves are telling us the same information as the table. Yeah? Why is the person willing to pay $10? Why is the total 2 and not 3 if there's another person that would be willing to pay $10? I believe the person is included. If the price is $2, both Ann and if the price is $9, both Ann and Bob were willing to buy a hamburger at $9. Ann was willing to pay 10. Bob is willing to pay 9. Add them together and you get 2. Okay, you misread the table. By the way, that was maybe a useful mistake in terms of how not to read the table. This is not the number of people who are willing to pay, with a willingness to pay of exactly $9. This is the number who are willing to pay $9 or more dollars. Yeah. Okay. So, one thing, quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. In fact, this gap, right, this difference between quantity supplied and quantity demanded, that is, in plain language, a surplus of the good. More technically, excess supply. Okay. There are more hamburgers being manufactured than people want to purchase. Now, there are 9 restaurants making hamburgers, trying to sell hamburgers, but there are only 2 people who are willing to pay this much for a hamburger. So there's a mismatch. Too many hamburgers are being produced, and some are going unsold. Many are going unsold. But it's important to realize that in this type of graph, the gap between quantity supplied and quantity demanded is interpreted as a surplus of the good or excess supply. Okay, now this can't be an equilibrium for a couple of reasons. One is there are all these companies with unsold goods, and that puts pressure on the price to come down, because maybe I was not one of the lucky firms that was able to sell my hamburger to the people willing to pay $9, Ann or Bob. So I have an unsold hamburger. Well, what am I going to do? Throw it in the trash? Or maybe I'll put it on sale, okay? Hey, special price for hamburgers. I'm going to bring my price down to $8. And then Chris, remember Chris was willing to pay $8 for a hamburger. Chris is like, oh yeah, I'll buy it. Okay, so these sellers with excess supply will try to bring their price down to attract more customers. Okay, so there's going to be pressure for the price to come down. So this unsold stuff, unsold product, causes pressure for the price to come down. Okay. So again, it's not an equilibrium. Next, let me try a different price. Try a low price. What if the price in the market were $5? Okay, right here, that's $5. Well, at a price of $5, we can follow across to the supply curve and demand curve to see what people would be willing to produce and what they'd be willing to purchase. Okay, if the price were $5, the quantity supplied is determined where 5 meets the supply curve. Quantity demanded is determined by where 5 meets the demand curve. Okay, so there's quantity supplied and quantity demanded. Now, again, these values are not the same. There are 13 people who want to buy hamburgers because they're so cheap. Okay, but because hamburgers are so cheap, only a few firms are willing to sell hamburgers at that price. There are only 3 businesses that would sell hamburgers. So 13 people want hamburgers, but there are only 3 hamburgers being sold. Okay? So this gap between supply and demand, this is a shortage. Okay, in like simple terms, a shortage or excess demand. By the way, whenever quantity supplied is different from quantity demanded, at any price where quantity demanded and quantity supplied are different, the amount sold is the smaller of the two. Okay. In this example, 3 businesses were willing to sell hamburgers, 13 people want to buy hamburgers. It's completely irrelevant that how many people want to buy hamburgers if only 3 are being made. Okay, so 3 hamburgers would be made, 3 hamburgers would be sold. But then there are 10 people who want hamburgers but can't find them. Okay, now here we have a situation where there will be pressure for the price to come up. Because I might have really wanted a hamburger. I might have been willing to pay $7 for a hamburger, and I see someone, I'm not able to find one, and I see them being sold for $5. I might go up to one of these businesses and say, hey, listen, I'll offer you $7 to make me a hamburger. The business would be like, yeah, okay. There are some of us who'd be willing to, there are a few more of us who'd be willing to sell hamburgers if the price came up to $7. So yeah, there are some businesses that would find that an attractive deal. So there'd be pressure to raise the price. Essentially, the um, the unsatisfied buyers. Okay, unsatisfied in the sense that they don't get what they want. Start bidding up the price. Hey, I'll pay $7 for a hamburger. Oh, I'll pay $8. Okay, because they want hamburgers but can't find them. Okay, so again, this price, $5, this is not an equilibrium price. And not an equilibrium. Okay. EQM will be my abbreviation for an equilibrium. So let me make a general statement. Okay. If the price causes quantity demanded to be less than quantity supplied, there is a surplus being produced at that price. And this causes pressure to decrease the price. Okay, there's more being produced than people are purchasing. Some of the suppliers with unsold inventory would start offering a discount. Okay, and so let me say this situation where the price causes quantity demanded to be less than quantity supplied, that's not an equilibrium. Okay. Not an equilibrium price. Okay. Flip side, if the price causes quantity demanded to be greater than quantity supplied, there's a shortage being produced. And this is going to cause pressure for the price to come up. The consumers who can't get the good start bidding up the price. Hey, I'll pay you a little bit more if you give it to me instead. No, I'll pay even more, and so forth. So when the price causes the quantity demanded to be greater than quantity supplied, that's not an equilibrium, which by process of elimination, the equilibrium price must be where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. Okay, That must be the market equilibrium price. Here's my graph. Again, and what happens if the price is $7? Okay, I picked $7 because here at $7, the quantity supplied is 6. Quantity demanded. I take that back. Quantity demanded is 6. Quantity supplied is also 6. If we go to the graph, here at $7, follow across, both quantity supplied and quantity demanded equal 6. Oh, the equilibrium happens where supply and demand intersect. Okay, so the equilibrium in the market occurs where supply curve and demand curve intersect. Got it? This magical point is the market equilibrium price as well as the quantity. So trace down from here and we get the equilibrium quantity is 6. Okay, now a little bit more notation. Often for equilibrium values, I will put a star up and above a letter. So like P star, that little asterisk above it, stands for the equilibrium price. Okay. And Q star will stand for the equilibrium quantity sold. Okay, so in this case, the market equilibrium price, Q star, is $7. And that's not price. Market equilibrium price, P star, is $7. And the quantity sold is 6. Okay. When the price is $7, there are 7 companies that want to sell hamburgers. There are 7 people who want to buy hamburgers. Everyone who wants a hamburger gets one. Every hamburger that's produced gets sold. Okay, sort of everyone is happy at that point. Alrighty. Sound good? Okay, so you've seen, I think really our most important model in economics, the model of supply and demand. And we often use this to think through what happens when something changes in the market and come up with some prediction of what happens in the market. And we often do this fairly abstractly. So let me go to this same example and think about what would happen if there's an increase in demand. So let's see. Our market starts out in equilibrium right here at a price of P star equals $7, where the quantity sold is Q star equals 6. And then something impacts demand for the good, and there's an increase in demand. So let's suppose something happens that changes that changes how much people are willing to pay for hamburgers by plus $5 to willingness to pay. Okay. Maybe everyone in this town got wealthier and they're willing to pay more for a hamburger. Or a report just came out from from some health people saying that hamburgers are even healthier than we ever realized, and everyone should eat more hamburgers. Okay, something increases demand, and whatever people were willing to purchase at some price earlier, now they're willing to pay. Now they are willing to pay $5 more. So previously, one hamburger would sell at $10. Now that hamburger will sell at $15. Previously, two hamburgers would sell at $9. Now they will sell at $14. Okay, I hope I did this graph right. Previously, four hamburgers would sell for $8. Now four hamburgers will sell for $13. Okay, hang on just a second. Price, pause. Yeah, okay. Okay. And so continue. I'm not doing a good job illustrating this. So let me just do this kind of abstractly. It's going to shift up this whole demand curve. I'm going to call this D prime. It's all going to get shifted up by $5. Okay? And the market will have some new equilibrium that occurs where the new demand curve intersects the supply curve. So the supply side of the market remained the same, but there was a change to the demand side. And in our graph, that shows up as something that shifts the demand curve up. And the new equilibrium occurs where the new demand curve intersects the supply curve. So that happens here at a price of let's see. So we would trace over from here. Okay, I apologize. I did not intend to get this wrong, but I did. Okay, here is shifting up by $5. Okay, here is the new demand curve, and here is the new market equilibrium. It occurs at a price of $9, where the number of hamburgers sold is also 9. Okay. Now, again, most of the time when we do these analyses, we're not trying to think about specific numbers and predict exactly what the value will be. Instead, we're thinking through what will happen in the whole market as these circumstances change. Okay, we'll think about what happens when a curve shifts. Let me do an example. Let me talk about the market for Let's do hand sanitizer. And compare the market in, say, November 2019 to April 2020. Okay. So I set up my graph. I always have price on the vertical axis, quantity on the horizontal axis. Now, there is some demand for the good. I'm going to write D and put a subscript 2019 on here. I think if I put numbers on here, you all get what this is trying to capture. Demand for hand sanitizer in 2019. And then there was a supply of hand sanitizer. So here's the supply of hand sanitizer in 2019. And the market would have been in equilibrium where the two curves intersect. So let's call this price P star. And the quantity that was sold, Q star. And I'll add subscript 2019 to both of these. Here's the price of hand sanitizer in 2019 and the quantity that was sold in 2019. I remember going to the store. Again, I have this wonderful wife who seemed very eccentric, and she's like, we should probably stock up on some stuff. Make sure you get lots of soap, hand sanitizer. And I went to the store, and you could buy a medium-sized thing of the good stuff, like Purell, for 99 cents. Okay, so that's like the equilibrium price of hand sanitizer back in 2019. Okay, then something happened that changed demand for hand sanitizer. By April 2020, we were thinking about this pandemic, and people's preferences to have clean hands changed. Their desire to have clean hands went way up. As I said, changes in preferences are something that will impact the demand side of the market. When the consumers have like a stronger preference for the good, it'll cause the demand curve to shift to the right or up. We can just say demand increases. Okay, people want to purchase more at all prices. Now, let me think through a little bit what would happen if the price didn't change. If the price remained at the 2019 level and demand goes way up, the amount that producers would sell at those 2019 prices remains the same. So quantity sold remains Q star 2019, but the quantity demanded, I'll call this Q prime, quantity demanded increases to Q prime. Okay, and this gap between Q prime and the amount, well, Q prime, the quantity demanded and the quantity sold, this is a shortage. Okay, it's a shortage of hand sanitizer. Okay, now this market is not in equilibrium. There are people who want hand sanitizer who can't get it. They're going to say that they're willing to pay more and more for hand sanitizer. And there's going to be pressure for the price to come up. the market will find a new equilibrium. We're probably in equilibrium again now. I bet if you go to the whatever pharmacy, you can find hand sanitizer on the shelf. Okay, it's not as cheap as it used to be. The price of that same previously 99-cent thing of Purell, now you buy the generic stuff for $2 a bottle. Okay, the price has come up. And we have this new equilibrium. I'm going to call this P star 2020, the 2020 equilibrium price, and Q star 2020, the new equilibrium quantity sold. Okay, as the price went up, a couple of things happened in order to relieve the shortage. One was on the supply side of the market. As the price came up, companies were willing to sell more hand sanitizer. Are you all aware that early in the pandemic, there were liquor companies that switched from producing liquor, like vodka, to switching to producing hand sanitizer? Okay, I mean, please don't drink the stuff, but hand sanitizer is essentially drinking alcohol, mixed with some soapy stuff. Okay, so vodka, hand sanitizer, it's the same thing. So they just added the stuff to turn it into hand sanitizer, got approval to sell it as hand sanitizer, and as the price of hand sanitizer went up, companies converted from producing liquor, drinking alcohol, to producing hand sanitizer. So that's what's happening along the supply curve. On the demand side, something else is happening. There's a reduction in demand, or a reduction in the quantity demanded. Consumers don't want to buy as much as consumers don't want to buy as much when the price starts going up. Okay, remember me. I said that I went to the store and I just started loading the cart with hand sanitizer. It's 99 cents for a normal sized bottle of Purell. I can just dump 50 of them in my cart and I'm all set. Okay? We're still using Purell at home, like pre-pandemic Purell. We're going to be stuck with it forever. Okay. It's easy for me to do that when it's $1 a bottle. If the price were $2 or $3 or $5 a bottle, I wouldn't be doing the same kind of hoarding. As the price goes up, fewer people are hoarding unnecessarily. Okay? And so that's what's happening here along the demand curve. So this is, in fact, a little bit of a cool thing. Okay? Paradoxically cool, but as the price goes up, it cuts back on hoarding, which makes the good available to people who are not trying to hoard. Okay? I feel guilty. Like, I still feel kind of guilty being honest about the fact that we purchased more supplies than we needed, and then these shortages came along, and I was like, sure, I'm sorry you can't find any toilet paper. I've got some at home. I'll sell it for $10 a roll if you'd like it. Anyhow, no, so here's my analysis of what happens when a market changes. Does this make sense to people? Okay, I picked this example because we can all identify with this. We saw this happen in the past year. We know that hand sanitizer shortage. Let me maybe talk about another thing that happened early in the pandemic, and we can talk through this as well. The market for gasoline. Okay, I set up my graph. On the vertical axis, price. On the horizontal axis, quantity. And I put in a downward sloping demand curve to represent the demand side of the market, upward sloping supply curve. Okay, and then the market would be in equilibrium where the two intersect. Now, to be complete, I should call this supply in 2019, demand in 2019, and then there was an equilibrium price in 2019, and the quantity sold in 2019. Okay. Then a pandemic came along, and it changed things in the economy. And in particular, it changed the demand for gasoline. People stopped traveling. In April and May, travel just shut down, right? Every one of you stayed at home. Did you drive anywhere? No. Did you go on vacation? No. Did you fly anywhere? No. Did your parents commute to work? No. Someone in your family left the house once a week to go to the grocery store to pick up your order, and that was it, right? I mean, that's more true than not. There was a huge drop in demand for gas. Okay? So this shows up in our picture as the demand curve comes down, and there will be some adjustment period, but once the market settles down again, it will be in equilibrium where the new demand curve, 2020 demand curve, intersects the supply curve. The new equilibrium price, P star 2020, will be lower, and the quantity sold in 2020 will also be lower. Okay, so we can make a prediction. If preference for travel goes down, in other words, demand for gas goes down, then the equilibrium price will fall, and the quantity sold will fall. I'm not sure if you all were paying gas prices last spring. Gas prices last April were about half of what they are now. They were below $1.50 a gallon here. It was just like something that I thought I would never see at this point in time. What's even crazier, something happened to the price of crude oil, the stuff that's used to manufacture gas. Last May, the price of crude oil, does anyone happen to know what happened? Rachel, didn't it go down? Yes, it did go down. Did it get to $25 a barrel at some point? Yes, and it kept going down. It went to zero and then turned negative. The price of like oil, stuff that's used to produce gasoline, turned negative because demand was so low. Okay, the price keeps going down and down and down because no one wants to purchase it. Goes to zero, and then there's a problem. The oil suppliers, they can't adjust the price, or they can't adjust production fast enough. So they were still producing oil, and they had nothing to do with it. So they were paying people to take oil off their hands. They filled up all their like tanker ships. They filled up even ships that were obsolete and could no longer like sail. They filled them up just for storage. And then they started paying people to take the oil off their hands. At any rate, we have this simple model that predicts price of gas will come down and people will purchase less gas. Okay, and I'll just add a final note. As the price comes down, there are really two things that are happening. One is the price coming down encourages more people to purchase gasoline. Oh, it's cheaper. Well, now that it's $1.50, maybe I will. Oh, I don't know. Still not go anywhere. But it encourages people to drive more. Second, as the price comes down, companies have less incentive to extract and sell gasoline. Yeah. So it reduces both production and tries to increase the consumption, the demand side. Okay, we good with this? Okay, we've talked through the whole market stuff, and we've even done a couple of examples of what happens when curves shift around. Alrighty, so I'm done here.